Welcome to the Host of Heaven course. This is going to be an extremely interesting course, and it's probably going to be the most interesting and ultimate course that you've ever heard about angels. So share this with everyone you know. So this is going to be an amazing course. So what we're going to talk about today in the Host of Heaven course is we're going to discuss several topics. So we're going to talk about heaven's hierarchy, seraphim and cherubim, God's heavenly assembly. We're going to talk about the angel of the Lord, levels of holiness, angelic tongues, what was so special about Moses, priestly duties of angels, and so much more. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with heavenly hierarchy, nature, status, and function. We will begin the course by looking at God's heavenly hierarchy and assembly. In this section, we'll look at terms that talk about angelic nature, what members of the heavenly hosts are or are like. Status, the hierarchy of members of the heavenly hosts, including what this means to God and each other. Function, what angels do. So let's first talk about angelic nature. Majority of biblical information about angels comes from the Hebrew Bible. It states that angels and other members of God's hosts are spirit beings. Spirit beings are not embodied, at least not in the way that we as humans are. You can see this in several places in the Bible. For example, when the prophet Micaiah had visions of Yahweh. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him on his right and on his left. Then a spirit, Ruach, came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will go out and be a lying spirit, Ruach, in the mouth of all his prophets. From reading this passage, we can see several things. One is that the host of heaven are considered spirit beings, and also that the passage identifies the lying spirit as part of the host of heaven. This spirit either took control of the mind of Ahab's prophets or influenced them to all prophesy falsely. We can see this in other books as well, like Judges 9:22 through 23 and 1 Samuel 16. When Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said unto him, Behold now, an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. A name for God which some may have never heard is Lord of the Spirits, meaning God is not just over the good spirits like angels. He is over the bad spirits as well, and he can command and control them as he sees fit. The term for spirit in these verses, ruah, can also mean wind. In Psalm 104:4 it says, He rides on the wings of the wind, ruah, and makes his messengers, malachim, winds, ruat, his ministers of flaming fire. The word malachim is what gets translated as angels. These angels are also called winds, and could also be translated as spirits. Other biblical names for angels are messengers, Psalm 104:4, mighty ones, Psalm 103:20, heavenly ones, Genesis 1:18 and Deuteronomy 4:32, stars, 2 Chronicles 18:18 and Job 38:5 through 7, holy ones, Psalm 89:5 through 7, and Elohim, Psalms 82:1. Let's look quickly at the word Elohim, which translated means gods. Some may know that God is called Elohim. So how then can angels be called Elohim? In Hebrew, Elohim isn't used only for God, but this word is used for several other spiritual beings, including angels, demons, dead humans, etc. A better understanding of this word would also be to say spiritual beings. So there are other spiritual beings, but no other Elohim is on the level of Yahweh, God. Let's look at Psalm 82:6 through 7. I have said, Ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Some people have interpreted this to mean that we as humans are little gods, but this isn't correct, and it's also bad teaching. It just means we are also spiritual beings, but we are not Yahweh. God is the Elohim of Elohim. Angelic hierarchy. First, let's talk about those with the title Prince. Not all the angels in heaven have this title. Those angels with the title Prince are also called sons of God. These princes were each assigned a nation to look over by God. They rebelled against God, however, and did evil. In Daniel 10:13-20, you can read about these princes over the nations that are against Yahweh and his people. There are also the word chief prince, which suggests an even higher authority. Example, the angel Michael, the prince of Israel, Daniel 10:21 and 12:1, is one of the chief princes. The phrase sons of God is family language. Think of an ancient king. The children of the king were not just messengers, they outranked messengers. The sons of the king were an elite level of authority. In this way, they were extensions of kingly authority. They were given this status by the king himself. The kingdom would have hundreds, even thousands of individuals, but authority was in a hierarchy. Angelic function. Messengers, as we talked about previously, Malachim means messengers. Humans can also sometimes be described with Malach. Prophets were and priests were, for example. The word angel is basically a job description, a spirit being from God's heavenly host sent by God to deliver or receive a message. Ministers. Another angelic function is to minister. Psalm 103:21 says, "Bless the Lord, all his hosts, his ministers who do his will." We can also see angels ministering to God in the book of Daniel 7:10. 1,000 thousands served him. Watchers. Daniel 4:13 says, "I saw visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven." You may have heard the term watchers when talking about the fallen sons of God. Watcher means someone who is wakeful or a guardian. This is where the word guardian angel comes from. Mighty ones. These angels' function is to serve Yahweh in a military role. They are members of God's heavenly army. The word Abir in Hebrew is used for angelic warriors in the Bible. It means able-bodied. This word would be used for a soldier. Cherubim and Seraphim. In Hebrew, both these words have to do with guarding the presence of God. In ancient Hebrew, cherubim and seraphim are not angels, but they are creatures. These creatures have wings in the Bible. If you've ever read the description of angels that appear to people, angels are always men. They do not have wings. They can at times have a glowing supernatural appearance, and other times they appear exactly like humans. And it's only from revelation from God that people realize that they are angels. To ancient Israelites, these creatures represented power. They were powerful guardians of Yahweh's presence, but they were also dangerous. If God allowed you into his presence, they were for your protection. However, if you came into God's presence in an unholy way, they will become a terror to you. This is why God set the cherubim to guard the way to the tree of life. Both cherubim and seraphim have wings. Cherubim have 4 faces and both human and cattle-like body parts. Seraphim is the plural of the word seraph, a Hebrew word also meaning snake. Cherubim and seraphim are never called malachim, aka messengers or angels. Cherubim are always placed at the boundary between holy and unholy. Why? It's to protect the holy from spiritual contamination. In Isaiah 6, we can see how seraphim have 6 wings and also arms. How do seraphim protect the presence? By breathing out fire on God's enemies. You can see this in other ancient cultures as well, like ancient Egypt. Why, though? Because false gods, aka the fallen watchers, gave this information to humans and deceived the nations. This is also one reason why if people mishandled the presence of God in both the Old and New Testament, that they would die. Think Uzzah and the Ark of the Covenant, and Ananias and Sapphira when they lied to the Holy Spirit. God's heavenly assembly, Mount Zion. You may have heard about the courts of heaven before. Many people have read about the courts of heaven in the book of Daniel and in Psalms. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat and the books were opened. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. God's court or assembly is not like a modern court at all, but it's like an ancient royal court system. There are many differences between a modern court and an ancient royal court. Yes, God is the judge, but think more of how a king would hold court versus a judge in modern times who has a mallet and is on a stand. The members of the host of heaven are described as standing in attendance to the seated king judge, who is God. Standing means they're attending to someone who is superior to them. Standing also means that they are available, ready, and willing to carry out the king's command. When God showed Moses the blueprint for leadership of Israel, this was actually based on the heavenly assembly. Paul also uses this model of heavenly assembly when describing the structure in the New Testament church. Something else that is interesting is about true prophets versus false prophets and God's heavenly assembly. True prophets know about some decisions that are made in the heavenly assembly, where they stand ready to serve Yahweh. Example, Elijah introduces himself as the prophet of Yahweh before whom I stand, 1 Kings 17:1 and 18:5. The prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel were also knowledgeable about what was going on in Yahweh's courts. God is the one who raises up prophets to serve him, aka stand before him. Priests also minister before God. In the heavenly assembly, the hosts are at God's right and left hand. To be in God's service is a high honor. The heavenly assembly also bears witness to Yahweh's choice of prophets. In the Bible, all prophets are validated by a supernatural encounter, which at times takes place in the heavenly assembly. Jeremiah 23:16-18 says, "But if they had stood in my counsel, they would have proclaimed my words to my people." Another word for counsel is assembly. The context of this passage is saying that true prophets have stood and listened in Yahweh's council or assembly, where false prophets have not. Daniel 7:9-10. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, and his clothing was as white as snow, and the hair on his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Here the Ancient of Days is the leader, but there are some members of the assembly that also get to sit on thrones, like the 24 elders, which the Apostle John sees enthroned around God. John saw the heavenly assembly as well. In the ancient world, people believed that the gods held their courts on tops of mountains. Why mountains? Because mountains were close to the sky, and the skies above were where the gods lived. This is why scripture is always talking about Mount Zion. Mount Zion is not on earth, but it is in heaven. Now let's talk about the most mysterious angel in the Bible, the angel of the Lord. The most well-known angel in the Old Testament is the angel of the Lord. This angel is actually Yahweh himself in the visible form of a man. This angel is helpful in understanding the Godhead, God being more than one person and each person being equal. This was actually a common teaching in ancient Judaism, but after Christianity came about, it was declared heretical by unbelieving rabbis. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. This verse is interesting because this angel has the authority to withhold forgiveness for the sin of disobedience. The wording sounds just like in the Gospels when Jesus said that he had this authority as well. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Matthew 9:1-8. Jesus showed them by his miracles that he did have this authority because he was God. Here's another example of the angel saying he is God. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgamesh to Bochim and said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give your fathers. The angel of Yahweh says it was he who swore to the earlier patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they would have the land. This identifies the angel as Yahweh. Now in the next course, this is the second part of the course where we're going to start with the angel of the Lord as the commander of Yahweh's army. So please stick around for the second part of this course. We're going to talk about the angel of the Lord is the commander. We're going to talk about levels of holiness. We're going to talk about the priestly duties of angels. We're going to talk about angelic tongues and more. So stick around. Thank you.